This episode of Snake and Banter is of course brought to you by eSportsBet, the esports industry's leading crypto odds matrix, and you can get yourself a 50% deposit bonus on up to $200 by using the referral link in the description box below. Now, if you're a CSGO fan and you want to bet, you're interested in betting, they have all the matches you can imagine. Like if you go on here right now, look, I'll go to the CSGO tab. They've got like Blast Showdown. They'll obviously have the actual Blast finals themselves. They've got a retake series. They've got the Elisa Open, which is that Finnish league. If you remember, they've got ESEA Advanced, ESL, all the different regional leagues. You go all the way down the Polish league, leagues you've never even heard of, Spanish league, etc. So remember, if you want to bet on CSGO, consider eSportsBet. Right, this is going to be another episode of Snake and Banter. Not feeling at my absolute 10 out of 10 peak, so I've got the lights dimmed down a little bit. Maybe we'll have more of an intellectual salon from the Greek era. A lot of Socratic... No, I probably just... Look, if anyone knows the way I work, it's the same way I operate in the green room. If I ever come in a bad mood, the next 20 minutes involve relentlessly, you could say criticising, I would say just making fun. Not making fun of, making fun, because it sounds just vague. It sounds fun. It sounds almost cute when you say it like that. Basically, you just make fun of shit until it sort of like works you into a favor. You just get back in the mood. You go, there we go, I'm into the mood again to watch CS now. Like, who do I hate in this game? Oh, Zipnix, he's got the bag, wasting everyone's time. Right, we're pulling against him this game. Right, we're back in the game, back in the room.
Despite what NATO Sapphics Twitter fans may have you think, it's okay to be toxic and negative on certain days, you know? It doesn't have to be all sunshine and rainbows every single day, every single time. Just have to get that off my chest.
And by the way, jokes aside, I actually find it does also, like, that's another way of engaging with the scene. Like, I'll give you an example. We might even address it in this show, I imagine. Maybe there'll be some talk of the major hires, since it's obviously the big hot button topic and there's all the debate back and forth. One area about that, right, that I hate personally, you guys can have your own opinion, whatever you want, right, is where it obligates people. It doesn't really, but people feel like it does. It obligates them to go, look, thanks for fighting for me, guys, but, you know, please don't say anything about other talent, and definitely don't, like, say I'm better than them, because, you know, it's not about a competition. It is literally a competition. It is literally the best people in the world are trying to do the biggest matches in the world. They only let 2 fucking people do each game at once. They only let 3 people on the desk at most. Like, by definition, just like the players, we are competing. And guess what? Like, if I'm a pro player and there's a spot in FaZe Clan, I do want you to say I should be in FaZe Clan. That's going to help me get in FaZe Clan. I don't just go, well, good luck to everyone else in the scene. Hope. And it's like when I made it fun. People thought I was joking, but I was being serious. When I made fun of Nico and Simple at the Major when they were in the final, and they came out, and you thought, right, this could be amazing trash talk. Like, these guys know each other. Neither have won a Major. You could have some amazing banter. You could banter, like, you know, after this Major, it'll be only you that doesn't have one Nico. You could have you could have sick lines. You could even prepare it beforehand, by the way. Instead, what they did was they tried to make it have as little pressure as possible and make the no hard feelings and say, like, oh, and I hope both teams just play great, and, you know, like, whoever's better wins or whatever. It's like, what are you talking about? No, you want to win, you moron. You actually don't agree to disagree on who you think should win the Major. That makes no sense to anyone. If it's someone else, of course they can have their take. You surely should think you should win. So anyway, and that's one thing I'll always battle, which is when people try to be like, let's just agree to disagree on checks notes, our own opinions. It's like, that's the one thing I think I will be agreeing to disagree on. I think I'll just stick with my opinions. So speaking of sticking with my opinions, we've got Hawka on this episode, who I did say way back in the day was on the rise, getting all... I mean, sadly, turns out everyone else from your generation has been hired for the Major, Hawka, just not you. Look, I didn't want to make it a whole thing, but, like, apparently everyone hates Hawka. That's the new show in esports. The fuck? It's not really like that, but there must be a part you think, like, bloody hell, what do I have to do at this point to get in?
Is that Thorin's new podcast? Everyone hates Hawka.
Yes,
I'll get
exactly.
on it. I'll come in.
It's got a really long guest list, you know, prize. So that has legs it can run. Yeah.
Jeez, it's kicking me while I'm down, eh? I would say, like, the Harry and Hugos and Scrawny and Launders are much more established. I think it is fair to say. So it's, you know, it is what it is. I'm happy that those guys have got it.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, just want to put it out there. Hawka and Dinko is a very slept-on duo. As in, like,
for sure it is. Doesn't get any hype on Reddit as far as I see. Never mentioned,
When you guys work, it's great. It's great work, but it's just that it's the lack thereof, you know. If there were more opportunities out there, if there was one more caster slot available, you guys would be killing it in that slot.
Yes. Appreciate that. We'll get there.
I think the main problem for me is that Hawka talks too much about analysing the game and, like, player performance. He doesn't talk about what he does in matchmaking all the time, because apparently that's a really popular like
I think
checks notes style of professional commentary. By the way, in general, just fucking knock that on the head. Do it in a random group stage game, boys. Don't do it in real matches, like in playoffs and stuff. No one gives a shit that you hit a headshot in a fucking Mirage plug. Get over yourself. It ain't about you. You're just there. The part that's about you is what a brilliant job you're doing, focusing on those players, you moron. Like, imagine if I just made all desks about our playing matchmaking. Like, what the fuck? What would that be?
Imagine NBA commentators just talk about what they're doing.
Mental, wouldn't it? I know.
Oh, I hit a 3 from the corner the other day.
You know, like Kevin Durant unguardable reminds me of me when I'm playing with the old guys down at the Y. You know, I've got that fucking baseline jumper down. They try to go for me. Like, you'd be like, I don't care, mate. Not asked.
Playing shirts versus skins.
I know. Just listen, mate. Not asked. So anyway, Hawka, as is traditional on this show, obviously the guest starts first. So what is your good point? What's the good point you want to discuss?
Yeah, my good point is, and I'm going to say this is like more broad than specifically talking about the player, just that karrigan is 32 years old and you could argue he is peaking in his career. I just think for the overall ecosystem and for the game is so great because it reminds me a lot of comparisons I would make to the traditional sports that I like the most, where you can have the veteran savvy, like I'm looking at MMA, NFL, you have this ability to continue to compete based on other factors, which I think is basically really important in any competitive discipline. I think it really implies the depth that there is in any competitive area. And I think in the online era, there was kind of a concern, at least in my eyes, that there were just a bunch of young aimers upcoming and we didn't get the lands, so we didn't get to see the ability for veterans to show what they can do. And I think now we are starting to get that back with people like karrigan. And you can even argue it with someone like Shox, who I would say is going on like a really nice trajectory in his career, which you can follow along with, going from like a star to more of a kind of supportive, lurky player where he's more using his instincts to get him kills now. And those are the sorts of storylines which I think just across an entire game are so fun to keep track of, at least to me.
I think the thing that's cool about what's going on is that it's undeniable that the in-game leader role needs somebody with veteran savvy. If you don't have that, you're just going to be behind. And I think the obvious kind of counterexample would be someone like Nafany, where individually he's better than karrigan, but in high pressure moments doesn't know the call to make, doesn't have the expansive playbook, or sometimes there's an emotional response in terms of the call that you should make as opposed to one that's maybe more strategically sound. Like a complicated default with multiple layers to it might work on round number 7, but on round 30, you need something that's going to be easy for your players to follow. I actually talked to karrigan really briefly at the RMR about some of the calls that he made, and just kind of like when he knows that his players are a little bit more stressed, it's not the time to call a default. It's the time to call it a set piece. And I think that's been something we've kind of thought on the desk before, but now I know in writing that basically he thinks this too. And also you kind of look at his trajectory and you're talking about how he's peaking, and I mean, yeah, this is arguably probably on par with that Boston Major finals lineup in terms of where this one should reach. This one is going into the major again as the favorites to win the whole thing. So if he's able to finally get that achievement now, then yeah, that would mean his career is peaking.
Yeah, obviously on past episodes, obviously ever since the kind of Eats It run, we've had a lot of topics about karrigan, but Hawka specifically obviously nailed the fact that he's 32. Like, I mentioned it on Twitter because what I was trying to make the point of, and this is where like a pleb will never get it, which is why actually in some ways like Twitter ain't the medium for me anymore. It's just too, like, it's become way too lowbrow, like the level of discourse there. It's just people, like essentially, by the way, it is just what it looks like if you follow European CSGO. It's a bunch of people with football avatars giving football level takes. Yeah. Like, fucking Ronaldo, shit, mate. Messi's fucking way better. Like, that's like the level of fucking discourse we're on now, boys. We're not, like, actually, Reddit seems intelligent compared to these fucks. That's all you need to know. Because at least, you know, the nutter on Reddit who's a maniac, at least followed the scene for 5 years or whatever, and maybe watched the game. Because this topic, right, the point I was trying to make was, everyone can just take the traditional path, which is what Glaive did, and go, did you win the most championships? Did you win majors? Did you have an era? The point I made is that karrigan has done everything in the most unique way ever. Like, the point I was making with the age tweet, fans won't get because they're idiots, which it goes like this. The same way a fan will go to me, well, you know what Glaive has that karrigan never will? 4 majors. By the way, we don't even know that. But yes, at the moment, it looks very unlikely someone will win 4 majors because only one fucking IGL ever did it. But in the same tone, I can say to you, guess what? karrigan is the #1 leader in the world at 32 years old. 26-year-old Glaive probably not going to do that. That's also, by the way, the joke is, mine's actually a more likely one than bloody karrigan not winning 4 majors. Like, if people don't realise, Glaive could already be out of CSGO. He was that close like twice already, and he's accomplished everything in his brain, maybe. So as a result, like, actually, that's why people don't get it. If this is one of the actual cool sub-storylines you'll find in one of the key archetypes in esports. So, you know, in sports, I've always said the obvious person that immediately grabs your eye is the champion. It's the best player, but he also wins, right? That's obvious. After that, though, the next most compelling is the person who had the skill to be the champion, but he keeps coming second or he comes third. That's the people you get obsessed with following, because then it's like, when will they figure it out, or will they ever get over the hump, or is it always a certain opponent stops them? Like, what's cool about those guys is, another thing they have to have is, because they haven't won their championships yet, they have to have way more endurance than the guy who's just a champion immediately. The guy who's a champion immediately, think of the Brazilians, you just have 2 good years, bish bash, you're in, you're out, and then you've got it set at that point. Even when, by the way, people like Fallen have, he's now put in like half a decade of being shit, boys, and people are still talking like he's like a fucking, like he's a peer of karrigan's. So if you're karrigan, because you haven't won yours yet, you have to just keep being amazing for like 10 years, mate. This is unreal. But he's doing it. That's the craziest part. Like, this is like that Simple thing, where if people don't realise, if we're actually being honest, Simple never should have won a major, because when you get as good as he was like 5 years ago, it should be over after 2 years. Like, his window should have been and gone. It's actually incredible he got this one like out of nowhere, and even then the fucking, this is why you know he is just like the chosen one. Like, even like the fucking, it's like the reality itself had to warp to deny him the fucking era. Like, that's the only thing left that could stop him, was like Thanos or something just fucking using the reality stone, like so that's it, it's over apparently. So yeah, I think the fact that he's done it, first of all, it proves it's possible. I definitely agree with all the points you're making as well. Hopefully this means that people finally get that this specific role, the IGL, I also think certain supportive elements, as shown by the RPKs of the world, can do it as well. These are the roles that are the most about like decision making, understanding what the team's doing, understanding what the opponent might be doing. Like, these aren't about like raw aim. Like, you've got the players that do all that shit. So to me, I think the way you nailed it was very well. It's not that you can't have a young IGL, but it's that if you're a young IGL, you better basically be maxing out all the other stats for the one that you don't have, which is age and experience. Because as soon as you get in front of that crowd, we are expecting you to fall apart. Like, the reason Nafani's the best example is because actually when Gambit came around online, they legitimately were amazing tactically. They actually did look like Nafani is doing an incredible job. I even think on LAN, actually, people have been harsh about how bad his team was. I think it was some of the individual players dropped off, and he generally called a pretty good tournament. Just not as effective when you're not online. You don't have the coach talking. You can't all come 24. You know, there's a load of factors on LAN. But all you need to know is this. There have been 3 LAN series between karrigan and Nafani, and every time it's like Nafani's fucking just going back to school, isn't it? And he's getting the advanced course, the PhD level course. Because that's the real problem that people didn't get about the online era. It's not that like it's not real. It's like you never fully get to access the true highest level of like tactical Counter-Strike. And one last thing I'll say is this. Here's the other reason why it's a bit dodgy, in my opinion, to have like the genius IGL be really young. It's why, if you notice, I was very careful, but one of the only people I've put in that category is Alexi V. I actually think he has like the chops to be a karrigan. The reason why, even though I think they're brilliant, it's a bit more difficult to have like Nafani and Cadian, for example, is what you said. You nailed it. Right? If it's a random online game, they'll do an amazing call. And in fact, they can play to their calling style, where they give themselves that room to mix it up and to do something different. But the problem is, under the most pressure ever, that's when that doesn't work. Like, that's why people don't get it. You know, they look at karrigan's career and go, ha, guy's a bloody failure. It's like, it's the other way around, you more, and he's trying to do something no one's ever done. Who's ever been an IGL this style with international players just all totally mixed up, trying to figure out where you fit them, what role they play, what style can we play, call on the fly the whole way, and then try and win everything in the game on that? Like, and remember, he doesn't even have a Zonic behind him, so I think it's incredible, and I hope what it'll mean in the future is this, that if you are someone who isn't a karrigan, but you are a Snappy, an MSL, you're also like a quality person with experience that can be used, you'll still get your gig. It won't essentially be like FPL for IGLs, and we'll just have a new bloody IGL every 3 years, because as you notice as well, here's the difference between stars and IGLs. You get people who show promise as IGLs, but not many of them become like the mainstays that stay in the scene for 10 years. It's way less. Like stars, you can chop and change. The IGLs, you notice at the bottom, like as soon as you kick your IGL, your whole team could just go to the bottom. If you keep your IGL and you change one player, you can sometimes retain like 80% of what the team had. That says to me how much the IGL imbues into the team. Right, Maui, what's your good point? What are you going with here, mate?
Mine is that I'm just so glad that finally Launders and Scrawny are doing a major. I could wax poetic about every person that got the nod for it, but really, I think that this is the duo that has deserved it for such a long time. I even like Harry and Hugo have actually done a major before, which is why I'm not really including them in this like first time sort of thing. But basically, like,
which one did they do? They did
like Berlin one. Yeah, they did the Berlin one. Yeah,
I could have been. I just can't remember it. Okay. Maybe they just did the group stage or something.
Yeah. I think it was just group stage. Group stage, but they had done one before. But basically, I'm just glad Launders and Scrawny finally got the nod. It felt like they were already capable of definitely doing the last one. And I think that they've just fixed so many problems that they've had throughout the years. Basically, like I think it's safe to say that a lot of people didn't take really well to them immediately. Maybe, 2018 or so, 2019. And like, I kind of remember some of the flaws. Like Launders carries hype so much better now than he used to. Like carrying that, like as opposed to just dropping it as soon as Scrawny finishes his sentence. Like Launders still keeps the energy going. I think Scrawny used to be like way more binary in terms of his inflection, where it was like it's either like all in or not in. And it's like now there's like levels to it where he ramps up so well, and like it's kind of like the eco ace for Scrawny's excitement used to be in 2018, like as excited as the 1v4 clutch on round number 30, and now it's like there's levels to it that you can tell are there in his casting, like he's worked on it. I think that Launders used to be too wordy, and now he's incredibly succinct, and I think he delivers some of the best like post sort of round action commentary that you could possibly provide in terms of explaining what just happened. And I feel like in the games that they have had like delivered with gravitas, like Katowice end of groups, Navi versus FaZe, stuff that happened in the fall finals, global finals, all like those games. There's such a huge difference between them in a studio environment and when there's a lot at stake. And I think that they know how to change the gears in order to provide the best product when they need to. So basically, this is just, even though it made it seem like I kind of started with criticisms of them, it's that they've improved on all of that. Like they basically shedded all of the negative attributes and traits in their commentary from 4 years ago. And I think that it's completely deserved. I think that they are it's arguably one of the best, if not the best casting duo in the scene right now. I think that they are just excellent people. And they absolutely deserve this. So I'm super happy to see it.
Like how it just randomly went to just excellent people at the end there too. They're just great guys.
I mean like excellent casters. I'm excellent.
I
they are excellent people, but they're also excellent at their job.
And now you're like scared that you are gonna not call them excellent people. It's
both.
Yeah, no, I agree. I also think the one thing you didn't maybe touch on is the one thing they've always, I think, been really good at, which is having an incredible ability to be entertaining in boring moments, which is something I'm always really impressed with their back and forth.
Yeah, they did Cast Blast for a few years, you're right, yeah, true. So there were those BO1s.
There you go.
Keep going, come on, keep going. Come on, love yourself.
I think they're really good in those moments, and those moments are, I think, some of the hardest as a caster, because it's obviously easy to keep a game entertaining, and your job is basically to keep a game entertaining. And to do that in tough moments is, I think, just really hard. So I'm really impressed with them for that. The other thing I will say is you're really 100% right in that they're both much better at understanding the hype levels they need to reach. And I really realized that at this event, because at the RMRs, without a crowd, I think it's really hard to know sort of what level to hype to. Because if you go too crazy with no crowd or anything, it oftentimes does just sound weird. And there was a 1v3 from Simple. I think it was, I can't remember who it was against. I think Vitality, which I think Scrawny just nailed in terms of ramping
the one in
up.
Mirage, yeah.
Yeah, not going like too crazy at any moment, ramping it up, making it feel like it had the hype it deserved, but not like making it sound like ridiculous. And yeah. I just agree. I just think they're really well-rounded and really polished now. Polished, I think, is the word that sums it up.
Yeah, for me, they were the obvious duo that should have been hired for my money at the last major. Like, I actually thought, like, I don't even totally know, by the way, if they ever did go with the theme of it's a throwback major. I think that's just what we all, like, put together in our brain to rationalise the choices made and just the direction, because otherwise what other logical reason was there? But I personally thought I don't actually think you should do a major in that theme unless like it's explicit, like if Valve was involved and it was like a 10-year celebration. That's one thing, right? I personally think though that you should just hire the best people. So to me, I would still have hired veterans like Sadikist and Moses, Anders, etc. But I also would definitely have hired this particular duo. I actually thought out of all of them, they deserved it the most. Thought they did the best job. And here's the difference, and this might hurt people's feelings, but guess what? It's a fucking Thorin podcast. Fucking just buckle up, bitch. So here's the problem. If I had to look at the big two duos who haven't had the proper major, because as we say in Mauisnake, like even if Harry and Hugo worked a major, like they worked it in sort of like the minor role, the understudy role as it fit with the past one. This is if you're getting hired for real, because you're supposed to be the best. Here's the difference. Scrawny and Launders actually like grew with the Blast project growing to become legit. Like as I joked there, they did it when it was a joke, and then when it actually became like a real top product, that was when they got to like showcase their skills. And so as Blast grew, they grew. The difference with Harry and Hugo is they were just put into the hot seat of what is the default number one position in CSGO, which is I am the main caster for ESL. That's how they got their gig. So my problem with that is like that automatically, by the way, will push you up in front of awareness, exposure. You're just doing all the biggest games. Like people have to get used to you. So the problem I have is I don't feel as though there's as compelling a reason to hire Harry and Hugo. Look, if we're hiring like 3 or 4 fucking duos, yes, obviously I would put them in there, like at that point in time. But like, there's another problem I have with the whole casting talent thing is I don't personally think it's a case that like we're not a conveyor belt. You don't start at a 0 level of skill, and then if you keep going long enough, end at a 10. Some people will never get to a 10. Some people, if they're amazing like Anders, will just stay at a fucking 9 their entire career. Like some people can do that. That's unfortunately just the nature of things. So I have to say, what I actually would have done, like I agree with hiring these guys, but I even think another angle that some of these TOs are missing is I actually think some of the veterans have so much experience but don't have a set duo that I would just use that to my advantage. Like I would have Scrawny and Launders as a duo, but I would take, like, if you think of some of the other people who've had duos break, so like Anders and Moses isn't a duo anymore. Technically, it was going to be Moses and Sadikist. Sadikist and Henry G isn't a duo anymore. Obviously, in this case, Seminole wasn't going to attend anyway. But if you just took those 3 people, you could make mega one-off combos of like, and by the way, Anders and anyone is amazing. Anders and anyone is an 8 out of 10 duo. It doesn't matter who it is. Moses also will fit with a lot of people. And if you just put a good fucking colour commentator with Sadikist, that could be the final. I'm not even joking. Because that's one problem I have with the idea that we're hiring duos. It made sense in the past because the duo used to specifically negotiate together and they were just so good as a duo. I think some of the duos now are like, they're good, but you could also, that person could be just as good with like another person. Like, I think we're not making use of some of the old ones on that one. So, but anyway, I agree with the general point. It is definitely good that they were hired, but probably the biggest snob of the last major, if you ask me. Right, for my good point, what did I actually have as my good point? Let me have a look. Oh, there we go. You know what? It's a rare example, because you might think joking, I'd struggle with the good, but I don't at all. This is it's a purely wholesome point. Now, here's the thing. For me, this is good. For fans, this might be bad. All the good teams qualified for the major.
Oh.
Yeah.
All the good teams. As in, if I made a list before the major, here are the 10/15 teams that have to be there. Every single one of them made it. Every single one. There's not a single one that I care about didn't. Like, guess what? I'm not someone who pretends to give a fuck whether Mouse make it or not. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Like, even people, by the way, even the ones you might think I wouldn't care about, like Astralis, I'd still rather they were there. Like, first of all, they've got legendary names, and then secondly, believe it or not, this is where people aren't smart. Astralis losing is a better storyline than, like, Heat winning and still losing as well. Like, I'd rather watch Astralis lose at the major. So it's very rare this ever happens. I don't think people know how rare it is in CSGO history that every top team qualifies for the major. And not only that, this was the time when everyone had to qualify. It wasn't like the past majors. Well, remember, until from Berlin back, you used to get from the legend spot, just get top 8, etc. So this was the major, by the way, where thankfully we haven't had to even think about this because I didn't want to fucking bring it up. But imagine if that fucking conflict shit had affected Na'Vi and they didn't even qualify to their own major where they were the reigning champs. Like, this could have been the darkest major ever, boys. So thankfully, all the fucking grey skies are gone. The clouds are all away. So now we can just have a brilliant major. We can let the actual fucking play of the teams determine who wins it. And the last thing I'll say as well is the reason I was concerned that they all wouldn't qualify is because we had this weird thing with the RMRs and then like the NA one was super weak, for example. And then in Europe, even though like it's a great idea, the European one, who the fuck made those groups where like Group A was like a murderer's row, Group B was like, who the fuck? And then so like there was so many, in my opinion, chances for this to go badly that I don't know how we locked out. Like this actually suggests, by the way, as much as people hated on it, it actually implies to me, by the way, that things like the Bucott system to some degree work. Because what it means is that you didn't accidentally get an elimination game where it was like G2 Vitality. So I'm picking on random teams here, obviously not people I could have played. Like you didn't get a match where it was like that happens in Swiss systems that are randomized. You get the bullshit one for the 3-0 where the two bomb upset teams play, and then you get the other one. This system actually seemed, as far as I can tell, to make teams have the matches that they should have. So that might be a controversial take, but I enjoyed the fact that everyone qualified.
I think the one team that kind of, I mean, there were a couple teams I think in Group B that snuck in for me that I don't know if they would have if it were A, but like there was, I think, okay, I'll say this. For the most part, this was good in terms of who made it. Like almost, I think every top 15 team on HLTV made it except for Movistar.
Yeah.
Like,
I was looking it up. I was like, how are Movistar the highest ranked team that didn't make it? How are Movistar ranked 12th actually?
They didn't even get through the open qualifier. So that's on them. That's on them. Yeah. I say that as Big almost didn't make it through the open quals, by the way. But yeah, either way, I mean, there's a lot to like about this Swiss system and how it paid off. I will say, I think it was in Group A. If I'm not mistaken, like every single opening BO1 went the way of the favorites. Like I don't think BO1 should be used like way too much or deeper in tournaments or anything like that. But for these kind of openers, it actually surprisingly is pretty effective at weeding out the bad teams and just giving them a couple losses early on without having to over inundate just the viewers with a million different games.
They did also seed it quite well, I will say though. If you look who plays who, again, you don't have some like bonkers one. Like for example, like if you are FaZe, you do play like Eternal Fire. If you're heroic, you play Forza. Like it looks like they seeded it well. Yeah, it looks like they made it like a pretty reasonable one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that it worked out pretty well. I'm glad that we have the top teams at the major. Yeah, I don't really like if Heat made it over Astralis, I kind of was like, good for Heat, but at the same time, I'd rather just see what Glaive can do.
Yeah, of course. Stage, just give him give him a lottery ticket, basically. Because there's the other thing, by the way. This obviously doesn't exist as a concept, but if people don't know, I've always thought a brilliant concept from tennis is when they give out a wild card to the Grand Slam. Because what you do is, it's famously, if people don't know how in 2001, even Ivanišević won Wimbledon. Because what you do is you give what you do with the wild card typically is you either give it to an up and coming player, or you give it to like a legend who still plays. Because the premise goes, look, you're not going to win, like you haven't even qualified, but like, fuck it. You have a chance to win some games, and the difference is, like I said before, people would rather watch you lose, and if you ever go on any kind of miracle run, that's fucking amazing for the tournament. So, yeah, same concept with Astralis. Like, the difference was, Heat realistically was never going to do anything with they, whereas, like, probably Astralis won't either, but you at least want, like, the sweat. You want to, put it this way, you want, like, the anime version where you want to believe Glaive's in the fucking lab, working on shit on a blackboard, coming up with new stuff. He probably isn't, but you want to believe that, for your own sanity, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. Hawka, you have any? Yeah,
you have any thoughts on it?
Just that I think it. Not only do you get the top teams, weirdly enough, like if you were to pick like a wild card, for example, like Thorin's pointing out there, you probably would pick someone like Imperial just for the whole Fallen factor and just the names and whatever, and they made it. And then there's just a couple of regions that I didn't expect to make it, like the Bad News Eagles, obviously, Eternal Fire. Like, it's weirdly worked out that there's a bunch of interesting teams. IHC, obviously, I didn't even talk about them, the Mongolian team, who I did not think were going to make it. So yeah, just really cool that I think it's worked out nicely. And even, like you said, the teams that didn't make it, I think Maus and OG didn't make it, right? Like, I don't care that much.
Of like
teams not making it, to be honest. Like, I think OG came hot onto the scene, and some people got a bit hyped, and I never fully believed in that team fully.
No, that's also why the timing worked out, because the obvious teams that like at once upon a time might have been interested are like Maus, OG, and Fnatic, and luckily they're all in a spot where no one gives a fuck that they didn't make it. That's why I said it's actually just worked out amazingly, because that's what would have ruined that Group A if those teams had actually been legit. Some of them, like, then there would be too many good teams, not enough spots, all that jazz. Right, let's move on then. So we'll now move to the bad point. So Hawka, what is your bad point?
My bad point was, so there's just not that many lands outside of the top lands nowadays, which I think is a concern.
Barely any.
Yeah, so I was looking at Bad News Eagles as an example, who kind of broke onto the scene. The tournaments they had played before this, I wrote this down, was a tournament called Giraffe 50 Masters League, which doesn't sound like a real tournament to me. I think it's like a regional event. It's like Giraffe with a J in there.
I'm assuming it's some
like
Balkan tournament or something.
Some Balkan tournament. But it's just, I don't see how teams can get that experience. And I also think it's really hurting specific teams if you can't make it through online qualifiers. And the obvious example is instantly going to be like an MSL, because his team right now, yes. I think if there was still a lot of dream hacks around, they'd be invited to like a dream hack, right? They used to
just
be like one dream hack a month. Yeah, they get invited to it. They get a chance to maybe build some momentum. I don't see how a team can really like build momentum now. And I think the only thing that there is the I think is it called the conference that ESL is doing, which is
Challenger.
It's like the Challenger conference thing, which is almost all invites based off of their regional leagues, which sounds kind of cool in theory, but then I don't know how like a mixed team really can qualify for it. I think there's like one spot from Premier for EU, and then outside of that, I don't know how like an international team really makes it there, which is, I guess, kind of a concern.
Okay, I think that, well, the ESL Challenger is supposed to take the place of DreamHack, but like it does a couple things. It does a couple things just worse in my eyes. One, the branding is just terrible because what they have rebranded ESE Premier to is also called ESL Challenger.
Oh, right.
Yes.
And then this DreamHack Open Tournament is also called ESL Challenger. They literally have the same name with the exception of the word league in one, not the other. And then like you're saying, actually, the invites, I don't know how they come up with the 4 invites, but for example, at the beginning of the year, they did that one that VP won over Furia in the finals, and I think those teams were just invited, and it kind of felt like those are teams that are a little bit higher than I would normally give invites for a DreamHack Open sort of tournament. So I don't know. I just don't know how they go about that. And then, like you said, the 4 spots that are remaining, it used to be like if it were this upcoming one is DreamHack Valencia or ESL Challenger at DH Valencia. It used to have that Iberian qualifier, so you get a local team that's 100% going to go to it. And now it's just Asia, America, Europe, South American. That's it. There's no nuance to it. It's not like a local team is going or anything like that. So these teams that are like getting blessed with a tournament in their region don't actually get any sort of advantage. And like should a team that's just there because of their region be included? I say yes. I honestly just say yes. I'd say because of the local crowd that's going to be there, make it a more entertaining product for the people that are going to go to the LAN and watch the event, and give them one more team that they could possibly root for. So there's a couple of flaws right now in terms of building up teams that otherwise have no way of getting LAN XP.
There's definitely a big problem with it. Like the main problem in esports, as far as I can tell, and you only really notice this actually when you look at the old dominant countries and the fact that they don't re-up with talent, which is that in the past, because esports by definition grew organically, as in there was tournaments and then, like essentially the real way, the short version of how esports grew is like this. You have a LAN, and then at the tournament, you have like a little tournament at the LAN. And then eventually you're so good in your area, someone goes, well, let's hold a tournament for everyone in my area. And then you have an area tournament LAN in your area, and then someone's a champion in your area. It's basically like old school sports back in the day. You become the best of your area, then your region, then your country, then you go international, then you go for the World Championship. The problem is this. It's like we built up to the World Championship level, and then in came all the money men, and they made the World Championship level all that exists, and like we just let all the grassroots part that connected the guy who's a beginner to the guy who's a pro, that doesn't exist anymore. So if you're in Sweden, like I always been on these podcasts, there is no little circuit of LANs that you go to and you play against Get Right and against Brolan and against Crims, and they see that you're good and they give you a little insight. That doesn't happen. They just play in their FPL games, they play in their scrims with Fnatic, and they go to the massive tournaments. You will never get to play them unless, like we're talking about the MSLs of the world, now the tier 2 scene is just the first few rounds of online qualifiers, which is terrible, by the way, because you're also not even given. Here's the funny thing. You do increase the chances that the team will get an upset, but I don't think it actually in the long term helps them, because part of what makes you good in Counter-Strike is that in tournament play, you come into it having like a sense of like, I can prepare for these 3 teams in my group, or like I can prepare for this specific opponent, I can show them something, I can scrim a certain way. You can't do any of that in a random online qualifier where you play 4 games in a day and you don't know what the third game is. Like that's just almost like the equivalent of like playing FPL. Like, you're getting your skills warmed up. You're testing some things that you do out, but it's not a true professional Counter-Strike match like at the tier 1 level. And also as well, because of how ruthless tier 1 is now, and the fact that you've got this whole fucked up thing where even on a business level you can't get into tier 1. Like, if people don't notice, look how long it took bloody Gambit and Heroic to get anywhere close to being partner teams when they were the top 2 teams in the world. They had to go through all the showdowns, and as a result you end up with this scenario where how many of these bloody pinnacle cops and Snow Sweet Snows you go and look at, and it's like, dude, there's a top 5 team in the world in this shit. And by the way, they don't even win them most of the time. Like, it's mental. Like, in that scenario, that means even like fucking Gambit feels like they don't have enough tournaments and they're going over there, whereas that was supposed to be like, that should be like the team that didn't make it in the Pro League goes, right, fuck it, let's hunker down, boys, like Cole did back in the day. Let's grind all these little cops. That's how we'll get back in a position. So right now it feels like, unfortunately, the entire scene is cannibalized by tier 1, and I actually don't see a way around it, because unfortunately that's actually the game we've played. CSGO is not a traditional sport. A traditional sport is about, I support this team, right? The reason why that doesn't work in esports is people just want top level Counter-Strike, and so as a result they will watch the big tournament, and then it's not like, oh, but then fans of the other teams watch the small team. There aren't many fans of the other teams. So there's tier 1, and then anything else may as well be nothing. It's like if I had to do a random number, 90% of viewership's going to tier 1, 10 is going to anything else. And by the way, this is why it's going to get even darker, because in a world where you only get the 10 if you have the smaller cop, you're even more incentivized to beg the Gambits, the Heroics, the VPs of the world to come and play your tournament as well, because that's how you're going to get more viewership. So unfortunately, I actually think the top TOs and stuff they might look in the long run, they might claim they care about development. I don't think they give a fuck. I think they care about very short term, best numbers now, beat my rival TO, have all the best teams in my tournament. I don't think anyone actually wants to develop talent. And at the moment, unfortunately, this is actually why the fact that ESL just made DreamHack into like part of its qualification system is sort of an indictment of the times. There also isn't really a project outside of We Play Academy that expressly tries to develop and show you, expose you to new teams. Really, the rest of the tournaments, like I'm saying about the Snow Sweet Snow, Snow Sweet Snow doesn't want those teams. If they had the choice, they'd take the bloody Pro League teams. They just take what's left over, and that means if they ever get the chance to, they'll absolutely move up. They won't stay taking all these nobody teams and having a million Swiss system rounds where you play a billion games that no one watches. So, unfortunately, I agree. It's a bad point. I don't think there's any way out of it, though. I don't really see the light at the end of the tunnel on this one. I think this is just kind of what esports has become. So, whatever. Like I said, I can't lie. I'm in the same group. I don't care about watching Tier 3 Hawka. I'll only watch Tier 2 typically if it's like, there's like an amazing up-and-coming player or something. That's like my angle to do it. Or occasionally, if you're a team like back in the day of Forza, I might watch you if you have like a unique playing style or something. But realistically, the problem as well is like the one thing you can never complain about in CSGO is a lack of tier 1 competition. So I have too much to watch. Like, I haven't got any appetite left after I watched all that, so it's the way it is, isn't it? We're moving on. Is that the end of that point?
Yeah, I mean, it's just tough for any TO to want to come into the space, and like everybody's aspiration is to just get tier 1, whether that's be a tournament, be a talent, be a player. Obviously, like no one's really hanging around the tier 2 space and is like the tier 2 watcher or anything like that, unless they probably have a GM role of some sort where they're supposed to be scouting. I guess that could be the guy, but obviously he's not the majority, or even like he's not even a sizable portion of the minority. That's it.
Oh, absolutely. I'll even say this as well, by the way. Maybe don't let this secret out there, someone might actually bloody figure it out one of these days. I'm not joking. I believe if you put on a Snow Sweet Snow type tier 2 tournament and simultaneously you just had someone cast FPL games, I think the FPL games would get more viewership.
Yeah, because it's got top players.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be like Nico versus Brawland versus like everyone would watch that. That shows you though the problem with the tier 2 scene. Like, no, there's no real reason to watch it, is it? You just watch it because it's on, and that's it.
I mean,
anyway,
like not simple's like such a he's so far beyond anything else.
Even the others, though, yeah.
Even if it's like a twist stream, it's still going to get way more viewers than a Snow Sweet Snow semifinal.
That's just unfortunately the nature of the star fucking celebrity culture we're in, and it's not. That's why I say it. On those areas, it does bleed over outside of being a sport and being more like entertainment, doesn't it? It's more about like what people, who they like and who they're following, etc. Now, eSportsBet has one of the highest rebates in the industry, but let's also have a look how the site works, because I've got a little bet for you guys that I think is a pretty interesting one. So in the upcoming Blast Showdown, which is that competition where the teams that qualified through the open qualifier and the teams that didn't make it through the group stage play off for the last spots at the finals. We have an enormous game. We have Heroic, one of the top teams in the world, against ENCE, a team that's now a top 10 team. Obviously, they were in the final of ESL Pro League. And I actually think if you look at the odds here, so Heroic's like, they're 1.7471. They're expected to be the favourite. ENCE is all the way down at 2.529. Now, the reason why I've picked this game out is I do think Heroic is the favourite, but I think their chances of beating ENCE are a lot lower than that. Like, I actually think ENCE has a fairly canny map pool now. They can almost hold their own with Heroic in that sense, even showed some strength on other maps. I think you've got to add in that in terms of like raw firepower, I think there's not that much between the two teams. Sure, I would say Stoudon's going to be the best player in the server, but Spinks has looked amazing this year so far. I think IGL-wise, I might even give the edge to Snappy overall, I have to say. So I think this is a really interesting example of a potential upset. And as a result, I'm going to take ENCE to win this one. I'm going to say they win the best of 3. And I'm going to put a nice little amount on it. And also, by the way, last detail, I believe that this tournament is actually online. So even though everyone will be Heroic online, I actually think that will just help the ENCE players play without any sort of stress. It's not a finals game. You can just play your match. And I think they can sneak this upset. They're the underdog, but this is a doable one for me, lads. Right, for my bad point. Oh, it's Mauisnake's bad point, actually. Okay, what was your bad point?
Well, my bad point, you already alluded to this one, the fact that nobody really cares, but I just kind of think that the seeding of the groups themselves in A and B were a little fucked up, because I thought that Maus or OG would have made it if they were in B.
If they were in Group B, right.
Yeah, and I don't really, like, you know, I don't need every team 1 through 20 to make it to the major, but like, it does strike me a little bit strangely when like a Spirit that's basically been gutted and is like half the team that it used to be.
I keep forgetting they exist, dude.
Yeah, that they made it through when I think OG or Maus, if they were in this group, probably would have made it. I'll just give the nod to Maus because they did beat I'll give it to OG because they beat Maus in a BO1. So like, if we're just saying which is the better team of the two, like OG would have made it in this group.
To be fair, OG had to play Eternal Fire to make it through, right? In the final game, I think.
Yeah, and they lost in round 30 twice. They lost in round 30. So I think that's a little bit of an indictment on their ability. But like, after, I don't know. I mean, like, the thing is, I think that they're still beating Bad News Eagles or Team Spirit. They probably are just making it out of this one. I just kind of like this. I almost think of it like this. For the economics of the scene, I actually like it when bigger orgs succeed, because then that reinforces the fact there's positive reinforcement there that people are putting money into the scene. They're getting some bang for their buck, some return on investment, because then that'll draw more orgs in the future. If it feels like, I love and hate the Wild West nature of Counter-Strike. You know, it's beautiful to see a team like Bad News Eagles just kind of grind their way up and have this Cinderella story, making it all the way to the major, because that's going to change their lives forever. But I also don't like that when people are investing funds consistently into this space, there's sometimes no way to actually get a consistent return, because the level of competition has gotten to a point where there's just the lines are so blurred between tier 1 and tier 2 play now that you're not necessarily even going to get to the major if you throw out a salary that's probably 4x whatever I don't even know if Bad News Eagles have a salary. So I guess it's infinite times whatever they're getting. So I think that in a way I kind of like when orgs are rewarded for consistently, because OG's been in the space now for like 3-4 years. Like, I would like to see them have a little bit more success. Maus as well.
Okay. You care about any of those teams, Hawka?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I do. I'm actually just looking at the results now. I would say OG can feel a bit hard done by, but I would say so can Maus, because I didn't realize they only lost against OG, FaZe, and Vitality.
Yeah, that's
those
pretty
are their 3
tough,
losses. Huh? That is kind of rough to make it to the major.
And Spirit won against. They beat ASG, Endpoint, and Anonymo. Like, what?
Yeah.
What? You know, that's not that hard compared to what OG was put up, or Maus was put up against.
Oh yeah, true. I mean, even Bad News Eagles, they beat what? Entropic is like a kind of good win, and then it's ASG and Sinners. Like, yeah, that group B is just not as good. Is there like a massive? I guess there's just too many teams to just have it all in one big group. But like, I guess like splitting it up is because of that, just because there's too many teams.
I think one thing that's going to change for the next major is that I thought they gave spots to teams based off of previous major performances in some regards.
Yeah.
Like, so
probably
like America,
that's a typical theme at the majors.
America's got more slots than I think they otherwise would have, because let's be real, some of the teams that made it through the America RMR, would have just gotten completely bodied out of the European one. Like, I think like 9Z and somehow Imperial made it through with like the weirdest possible, like the teams that not Imperial beat. I don't think anybody watching this pod could name all 15 players on those teams. So like that's what's up. And I think that once the slots get divvied out a little bit more evenly, and Europe probably gets one or two more, then we're gonna see the Maus and OG make it through.
The problem I have with this one is like, I definitely agree with the way you framed it in the actual thing when you wrote the topic to me, that like they would have made it in Group B. I agree that is bad. Like I'm not totally sure. Like this is why I wish we had proper commissioners. People don't get this when I always harp on it in esports. The reason I want a commissioner, by the way, don't get me wrong, I know it'll just be a guy like Carmack who'll just represent his company. He'll biasedly argue only in favour of his company and what they're doing, try and explain that everything's reasonable, that there's no problem. That's great, but have you noticed the key point there? At least someone will have to explain it. Someone will have to give a reason that they have to stand behind. Right now, we have things that are done. Formats are decided, things are implemented, people are giving punishments, and you go, who decided this? Like, is it Valve? Is it you? Who? And then after who, we want to go to the person who it is, who says, and then go, right, why? Because I want to know at least the reasons. Like, if they can't come up with a reason, even a fucking fake reason, then I know they're full of shit, don't I? Because one of the problems I have with this setup is, like, even though, we could try and, like, reverse engineer it, like, if you just look with the eye test at those two groups, it can't be right. It cannot be right that's how you divided the teams up. I don't care what metric you picked. It can't be anything that would be relevant to a tier 1 analyst in 2022. Like, the divide of those teams doesn't make sense. It can't be from world ranking. It can't be from any of these things, boys. Like, sometimes you get unlucky and you do use world ranking, and like, you know, the world rankings are just in a space where like all the odds are like are amazing, and then all the evens of the teams sort of downfall, and you end up with like scuffed. I don't think that even is this. So the reason I do find it whack is it's like you say, if you expand it out to the whole concept of I'm any team in the world and I'm trying to qualify for the major, if you are the teams in Group A that didn't make it, you are just going like, so why is my qualification task like 5 times harder than everyone else's? Like, so in NA, I just had to win like 1BO1 at the right time. In the Group B, I just had to beat, as you said, like lineups of people where you look at like, oh, Copenhagen Flames is beaten, and you're like, how are you even getting to play that team? Like, what the fuck? And then, as you say, you go and look at the Mauisnake ones, and it's like, you essentially just have to beat a team twice as good as you to make a tournament where you're allowed to be way worse than that. Like, there's something off with that. There's something that doesn't quite... Because essentially, like, here's the question you should ask. What did they do wrong? What did Mauisnake do wrong in this qualification? Here's the thing. You can at least give it to OG because they bloody lost to Eternal Fire. That's at least like borderline. The Mouse one is like, you just lost to way better teams. Like, you didn't have a choice. So I agree. If you look at the totality, it's a bit fucked. Right, we'll now move on to my bad point, and it's actually tied right into that. We're staying right here on the RMR format. Because here's one thing I cannot handle. It's this stupid thing they've done where it's not just qualifying near the major. That's where people missed it. It's deciding where in the major you play. This is mental, boys. And by the way, the American one is the most insane one I've ever seen for this. Where essentially, here's the short version, people. If you just lose the first 2 BO1s, even if you still qualify and you beat all the best teams in the world, you cannot ever get the legend spot. Because you went 0-2. That's it. It's over. Now, the reason why I hate this is because it ties into what is a general principle for me, but is the opposite for TOs. TOs use the first phase of the tournament to rank teams and then have them play a playoff. I like the first phase of the tournament to just eliminate the teams I don't want in the playoffs. In my opinion, the first phase is just survival. I don't care if you win the group. I don't care if you come out 3-2. Both results are the same to me. You survived, that's all. Go to the next portion, a reseed or do randomizer, whatever. I hate the idea that in this particular case, because we have BO1s, like I'm saying, those first 2 BO1s actually decided whether your major's like twice as hard or half as hard. And that doesn't make sense because, especially when you do go and look at the smaller regions, it is laughable the teams that are getting legend spots. This doesn't make sense. Even though I know they're not using the terminology legends in the same way we used to, it does make a mockery even of the term. Like, how can Copenhagen Flames be legends of a major? They've never done anything at a major. Their claim to fame is almost doing something and then getting the most fucked free RMR group of all time and 3-0ing it playing almost nobody. Why are they a legends team? That's mental. So to me, like, that whole thing where basically it wasn't just here are the top 8 teams out the Swiss system. It's like, for real, we're using the fact that this one's 3-2, that means he goes like here, and this one's 3-0, so he goes up here, and you get to skip an entire phase of the major. Holy shit, that's mental. Like, you get to just skip playing like 5 to 8 maps and just go to the next phase. Like, what is the point at this point in time? Like, how can I even evaluate those teams, by the way? Like, for example, if Copenhagen Flames, because last place in the phase they're in, did they actually do better at the major than a really good team that was borderline and didn't make it out? Of course they didn't. We've now ruined the whole fucking placings in the tournament. The one thing at a minimum I should at least be able to assume, Mauisnake, is the team that came 9th is better than the team that came 16th. And I cannot even say that now. That might be completely irrelevant that might be like the placing might have no relevance on how good they are. So to me, I just think it's a silly format. Again, I would just say this: who the fuck argued for this format? This looks for me like I've even been around enough TOs. I think I know what happened. I think someone in the past was like, "I like Swiss system as a format," and then they just didn't think about the fact that, but yes, sir, but we're also determining which phase you go. You know, like it feels like that part was added at the end, and they were like, "Oh, well, it'll still work." Like, 3-0 all divided, but they haven't realised. Like I say, like. What is the task? Like, oh, sorry, sir, you lost a BO1. You can't play in that phase. Like, what is this? A BO1 decides that for Na'Vi. What?
Yeah.
What is this madness? You know what I mean?
Swiss book holes is great for qualification, but it strips like all the context away once you like actually want to seed based off of the results of it. Like, you can't really do that. And I think that like it would be best if they just use probably a double elim bracket and just went on like how far you go into it for who should qualify to Legends. Like that's the simplest way. It's the most just way. Like I don't care if it's a BO5 Grand Finals or whatever the hell they do, but at least make the format make sense in regards to what you're actually doing. Like progressing further in the tournament equals better standing and better placement once you get into the major. So I don't this was such a half-baked idea, and like I also want to make sure like there's clarity because I've talked to PGL about this, like who is coming up with this stuff. It's basically like Valve is passing down who is like what the tournament structure is, and they're employing a separate group of admins that's basically like Valve has worked with them before, and they're okay. This is where like the details got a little dicey for me, so I can't like say for sure. I don't know if it's like PGL's technically employing the admin group or Valve is technically employing the admin group, but either way, they're on premises and they're basically picked by Valve, and maybe the hiring has like some white label properties to it. Either way, it's basically Valve that came up with that, and they just kind of like didn't think all of this through, and so that's just really bad oversight on their end, because double elim just makes so much more sense for what we're trying to accomplish with this.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think you kind of nailed it where you said, like, from my understanding, when I've seen Swiss used, I think it's used in like chess, for example. I think it's used generally to be like, okay, this is the top certain amount of players, and then from there we go into like a playoff system, right? It's like to weed out like we have elo ratings basically for different people, and we make sure that we have like the top certain amount of people are going to go through because it's going to sort itself out because we play a bunch of games. And then from there, we get into like the important matches, which,
by the way, I heard something similar. Someone told me the whole point of why Swiss was used in chess is because you could have 1,000 people come who are all totally different levels, and you just want to quickly sort out a whole bunch of them and get them out. Like, it's whereas instead, what we're doing here is we're acting like we're ranking the 16 teams in that RMR group, where we're not. Like, because as I say, some of these are BO1s, and then it's based on like who you play in the next one. So like it's not really ranking them, is it? Like, it's something different as to what you're even setting up in that regard. Sorry, did you have any more point, Hawka?
No, that was it. No.
Fair enough. Right, we'll move on now to the ugly portion. So, Hawka, what was your ugly portion?
Yeah, I'm wondering if I'm being premature with this, but I'm going to stick with it. My ugly point is I did not like what I saw from G2's T-sides at this event. And I think their numbers and the actual rounds they're getting was fine at this event. Like, I was looking at the numbers, they were winning a lot of rounds. But just watching it, eye test-wise, I was not confident with the way the calls were going. It seemed to me like in a lot of scenarios, the protocols for map control just weren't great. And it felt like they would oftentimes like group up halfway through a round and then would go for a play, and they wouldn't have baited out enough utility. And then they kind of start to panic and go for some really like late rounds where they have like no utility left. It might be me being a bit premature because I know this roster hasn't been together for all that long, but it felt to me like the reason I put this in ugly is it felt to me like the way they were getting their T-side rounds at this event was by exploiting their opponent's weaknesses more than anything else. Like, I remember against Astralis on Vertigo, there were so many rounds they got because they kind of just got a pick on not Dupree, on Zipex at B on Vertigo, and he was just kind of playing the spot pretty badly. And I think if they went up against some top teams, from what I'm seeing right now, I think they'd actually struggle pretty heavily on their T side.
You're not premature about this because this has been going on since the inception of the lineup. I think I made a comment on probably this show, or maybe when I did that appearance on HLTV Confirmed, that basically I don't think Alexi B actually has, like, the biggest flaw in Alexi B's game is he's still not used to playing with star players, in my opinion. He's had to work with so many scraps for so long that I think he takes a lot of shortcuts in terms of how he wants the round to develop, because it's almost like he just wants to go into phase 1, into phase 2, into phase 3, and he doesn't let the round breathe at all. He doesn't let, like, the time, like, he doesn't let what star players do best, which is in a moment of transition, find a gap or find a way to just make the most happen. And I think that's, from the very first time watching G2 at Blast at the beginning of the year, the amount of times that they just took Banana and just exec'd with 1:10 left on the clock is like, bro, let Nico sit at Banana for like 30 seconds while you take bracket again. Nico will probably get a kill or make a great mid-round call for you, and then you can go back into either going into Banana, or if you got all the kills today, then sure, just go A, right? But yeah, I still kind of saw that, and I also looked at, like, sometimes the amount of utility that G2 used to do like the most basic tasks is like way too much. Like I saw, was it against Sangol? Yeah, I think it was against Sangol. Like, one round, they basically, like, were trying to take banana control, or just, like, start a round on T-Side Inferno, and within 30 seconds, they had 2 flashes left. Like, what the hell are you guys throwing a million nades for that early?
Yeah, no, and quickly tacking onto that too, I think that's actually why whenever I see them get into late round scenarios, I always feel like they have like no nades left. Like they have like 2 flashes to try and take a site. They haven't done enough to draw out CT utility, and they just end up like running into a blender. So it feels like the only way they win their rounds are when they go for these like middle of the round group ups, and then I don't see the other ways they're winning rounds, which is kind of scary because they're not winning those middle of the round group ups that often.
Yeah, I think you nailed it as well, Mauisnake. To me, one of the things people don't look at is you can do this on either end as well. In my opinion, one of the reasons I think Nico struggled to fit in some of the teams he was in over his career is he was in a lot of scoffed lineups because he had to go international route his whole career, and he doesn't have people that are from his culture, his background, his language, etc. So as a result, it's been a bit trickier, and I can totally understand why. You'll notice people like him and Simple, they almost have that like look of someone who's been in prison where it's like they can't trust anyone else fully. Like, they'll do it a little bit, but like, only as far as I can see you, bro. Like, let me hands on the table. Like, they have that vibe about them, whereas, you know, like a true team obviously is like the trust fall, isn't it? It's the idea that like you'll catch me if something goes wrong, like I don't have to worry about that. So you see it with IGLs as well. It's exactly like you say. It's the IGLs who don't get the big talents. They're always working with scraps. They're always trying to develop a guy into something. Like, when you have those sorts of players, you are by default going to make everything as simple, as streamlined, take as much decision making out of the game. It's the reason why, in my opinion, by the way, Vitality is shit right now, because what I think is that Apex was used to having Ziwu himself, and that's it. That's all he had basically on LAN, and he would have to run tactics that were like, Ziwu kill everyone, and everyone else just super decisively do this hit at exactly the moment I say go. The second I see an opening, we've all just got to go right now. That's all he could do. So guess what? When he gets Megas and Dupree, and in theory, he should now be, this is your chance to expand your game out, mate. You can be a true IGL. You can do Astralis style. You could do the slow-paced shit. You can work things up. No. He's trying to do the fast hit again. And if you pick like Megas and Dupree, you're like, what are we doing, bro? Like, we haven't even set up yet. Because the point is, they could take more space. They could do something more. You can give them more agency, basically. You can trust them to do something within what you want to do. Whereas, yeah, I get the vibe. He's too used to sort of like having to sort of brute force the game, as it were. Whereas when you get to tier 1, it's nothing about that. This is why I always say, when you see the genius teams like Astralis at their peak, or even when Gambit was online, what they do looks amazing. Like, everyone would love to have a team like that. You haven't got teammates like that, bro. There's your biggest problem. You haven't got 3 people you can trust to like do a rotation without saying anything, and like backstab the opponent without even a calm or anything. Like, this is next level shit you're working on. So I agree. What he hasn't done yet, what he hasn't realised basically is, He's got the fucking Lamborghini. Like, you aren't driving an old Ford Fiesta. You're not trying to, like, get every fucking little bit out of it and take all the... Like, you're in a sports car now, mate. You can settle back and be a brilliant driver. Like, in this scenario, I think if you even look at his career, it makes sense. What star player did fucking Alexei B ever work with? So people are going to go, now, Thorin, what about when Sergei was ranked? Oh, you mean the player that people were even telling me he was microing? So that's off the table immediately. Then the other star player he had was Alu, who was famously the secondary caller. So he's already essentially determining what he does, but he's the only one who's allowed to do it. So the problem they have in their team now is, like, you've got, like you said, Nico's the obvious person as well. When you have a player as good as him, and you look at all the shit he did before you came to G2, you've got to give this guy space to do all that within your system. Because if you do, that's when you become number one. So yeah, I think that's clearly a limitation he has, but it's also something you have to get over. Like, this is the time to get over it, by the way. You do this run in, you have the major, at that point, surely eventually it ticks over. Because the reason I do think that you can put some blame on Alexei B is if you actually look at, like, the different players in G2, beyond the fact that Nico isn't, like, the best in the world anymore, he's just, like, a really good player now, everyone else is doing their job. They're doing exactly what you'd want. Monassy's about at the level you'd hope he would be. Hunter's really consistent. Jax is just a role player, and Alexei B's the ideal. Like, he actually is on Alexei B now. You've got the pieces now. This isn't like OG where I thought he was always, like, gimped. You have the pieces now to actually go to the top, so it's all on Alexei B's shoulders now. If he wants the credit, which he'll get, now's the time to do it. Because I also think the reason why I find it a bit underwhelming is, like, their team sides aren't much that better than they were last year, and they had no bloody Monacy or Alexei B at the time. Like, that was just Nico doing it all, as far as I could tell back then. So, whatever.
Yeah. I do wonder, like, I don't think the Nico drop-off is fully because of Alexei, but I do wonder, like, how much of a factor that has played in Nico's, like, degrading level of performance. I don't really know how to weight that yet. I guess we'll kind of maybe just have to wait and see.
Thing is, if you ever have heard comms from Nico, he is also a player who is more in the vein of sort of like, because he's a top player of sort of like, let's not just rush in, like, let me work it, you know, like, let's work an angle, let's like, that's why he's the master of fucking the jiggle peak, isn't he? He doesn't just run down and get shot in the head. Like, he knows his timings and he sets it up and he takes his time and he creates the right fight. So I think as a team, he wants to do that as well. Because if you notice, almost every Nico team generally was a little bit slower in that sense. It wasn't like super high up pace. Because he obviously used to be a lurker, didn't he? So just kind of his fucking wheelhouse.
The only thing in the back of my mind is, like, is it a bit harsh, I guess, to compare to the form that Nico had at the end of last year was just, like, so ridiculous. Like, that, I don't think that was ever going to continue. It's weird in CS. It's like Simple is always in contention for number one, and it's just so ridiculous how it feels like everyone else just changes around to try and compete with him. Like,
exactly,
it's just actually crazy. But I don't think we can expect Nico to continue that level of form. So it's kind of that question in my mind of how much is the drop off really.
No, it is sick. If people don't know, it basically is just like 90s basketball where it's like every other star thinks Michael Jordan is their rival, but it's like he's all of your rivals, you more. It's just all of you versus Michael Jordan. That's it. Like, it's just taking turns to lose to Michael Jordan. That's what it feels like. Similar. It's like, all right, Zero, you had a couple of good years, mate. All right, Shiro's turn now. You can go.
There's one thing I did want to say. Basically, that's just that there are... This is kind of long. It's kind of it's a little bit of a tangent, but basically, like, there are people out there that say like Thorin can't analyze the game, or his analysis is all just cheap jokes and banter and shit like that. Just like to put it out there, the way that Thorin described how Vitality's T sides were different than Astralis' T sides. I talked to Dupree, and he used the exact same terms that Thorin just used to do it. So it's just one of those things where it's like, if you're not listening and you just kind of have a caricature of a person in your head, like, you might believe something like that, but in reality, like, would that same person then say Dupree can't analyze the game either? Because he described it exactly the same way, just like the explosive style that Vitality employ versus the way that Glaive used to call, which was slower and more like drawn out.
Oh, mate, the hilarious thing is, I always use Richard for this because it's true. I have literally, I'm not joking, seen Richard Lewis talk to Sean Gares or Gob B at their peak in CSGO, talk about a topic, and then take an interesting observation they made, say it himself on the desk, and then fans all go, he doesn't know what he's bloody talking about. And I'm like, I saw the point. Like, that was you've essentially just said Sean Gers doesn't know it, but you don't know Sean Gers is the one who said it. Exactly. It's like one of those fucking things where, you take, like, famous thing they do in America on, like, comedy shows. You take, like, all the quotes of the other political candidate that they wouldn't vote for, but you take the nameplate off and you ask them, like, what do you think of this? And then the joke is like, Trump said that, and then they've just gone like, yeah, good policy actually, like, and then what the fuck, oh no, like, the joke is like, that does apply. Yeah, the problem is, mate, it's like everything, the perception someone comes in with, the expectation before just informs everything they take out for it, innit? I know, it's whatever. It's a whatever. Right. What was your ugly point?
Yeah, my ugly point is that I'm gonna keep this kind of brief, but it's kind of ugly just because it's more like just how I feel and how I react to things like this. Where basically I saw a handful of, like, the major is like the epitome of this, where basically everybody is just like dogpiling on every person that gets invited, whether that's positive or negative, and there's like even sometimes, like, some pretty scornful things being said in these replies and these comments, and you kind of like what basically I see some talent that get on the defensive about this stuff, and I really feel like that's just feeding into empowering these sort of troll commenters.
They love it. Yeah, they love that shit.
They want to feel like you're responding to them because and they're goading a reaction out of you. So I just kind of like put this out there, like, I appreciate my fans, and I appreciate people that are fans of our work, but I also don't, like, let them change my mindset or mood for the day too much either way, in either direction. I think it's important that you don't give them too much credence on positive or the negative, because once you start to do that, like, your mental can get affected. And I've scrolled through comment sections before. I've read my replies and stuff like that. Like, I don't say I ignore it, but I also just, like, you kind of have to have a level of detachment or separation from it, because if you don't, then you just let your whole day get ruined by, like, 7 people that say something negative as opposed to the 15 or 20 that said something positive. Like, hopefully the numbers are probably bigger when it's the major, but you know what I mean. It's just like there's no way that I'm gonna let a comment section dictate my mood, and I think that this is why it's just ugly, because it's just like there's no, don't, like, saying stuff like that, like saying stuff. I'm not going to single people out, but I've seen it in, like, every esport at this point, where basically talent will be like, oh, these comment sections hurt me or something like that. It's like, grow the fuck up, stop reading comment sections if they hurt you. Like, it's the internet. You can just turn off your laptop. You're like, you just close your fucking phone.
Here's the thing. Normally, Hawker, I always let the guest go straight after, but I want to get in on this one first, because I have one thing to say, which is a bit similar to Mauisnake. I once made a video like this, but the problem is, this is the hardest thing about making all the videos I have, is it's really hard to remember the titles of the videos. So sometimes I can't actually find my own videos, because people don't know there's over 1,000 Thorin thoughts alone. So, like, unfortunately, unless I can sort of vaguely guess, like, it's just gone, boys. The joke is I've actually drowned out my own content with signal noise, like, using more of my own content. So it's retarded, I know, but basically there was a video I once did which was something like, it might have been called something like Reddit in its proper use, or like its place or something. And the premise I tried to explain was, I actually tried to just think from the perspective of an average fan. Like, if I was just a random fan of, say, Astralis or something, and I didn't have any connection to the pro scene of esports or comedy, and I was just a fan on Reddit, HLTV, Twitter, like all the rest of them are, and I thought to myself, well, where am I supposed to give my opinion? Because if I give my opinion on Reddit, then I'm a hater. If I give my opinion on Twitter, I'm a hater. If I give my opinion on HLTV, I'm an idiot and a hater. It's like, but that is the place for my opinion, though. Actually, the other way around, if I reverse it, why are all the talent going into that HLTV? Like, when the head thread is like, Thorin fans, come here. Why do you come there? Why do you click it? Like, it's only going to be bad. You know what I mean? There's nothing going to be good in there, is there? Like, and also, like I say, basically what I realised is this. In sports, this is the case. Like, in American sports, for example, Hawka, the famous place that supposedly they discuss sports is in the black community. They do it in the barber shop. Everyone goes to the barber shop, and while you're all waiting in the queue for the barber to give you your cut, you just, like, there'll be a TV on with sports on, and you discuss whatever, like LeBron versus Michael Jordan, or some fucking shit in the UFC probably now, I assume, or whatever sports they're into still. And basically, that's like the area. That's the equivalent of Reddit. Like, by the way, there'll be a guy in there who's also like, LeBron is a fucking shit, or whatever. There'll be the guy who has like the ridiculous take as well. then there'll also be the fanboy. No, it has to be Michael Jordan. He used to go His Airness or whatever. There'll be the fanboy in the stand. But the point is, that's their place to do it. And my analogy is always like this. Be a bit fucked up if religiously LeBron James every day after work just drove over to that barbershop and then sat lurking in a back room where they didn't know he was there, just like with a glass on the wall and going, I can't fucking believe they're saying that about me. They are haters. They're fucking haters. It's like, this is ruining my life. Every day I have to come here. You'd actually start to go like, LeBron, you're having trouble at home or something, mate. This is getting dark, mate. Because I agree. And listen, I have a problem with myself because if I read it, obviously it affects me. But I agree with you. Some of the responsibility has to come down on us. And especially this one, which is, here's the one I actually think the talent, and I'm going to loop it back into this topic, are actually fucked in their head. You know when they always say, and even my friends, my closest friends all say this, they all say, guys, you don't have to put someone else down to say that I'm good. It's a thread about who they should hire for the tournament, bro. Where the fuck else is that guy supposed to say, I think they should have hired Hawka instead of Mauisnake? He's not supposed to in that setting just go, I actually prefer Hawka, but Mauisnake is good, so I have no opinion. That is exactly the place for him to say, I specifically want Hawka over Maui because I think Hawka's better. That is, by the way, that's totally appropriate. The real question, like we're saying, is maybe if you're Mauisnake in this analogy, maybe it ain't the right time to go on that thread. You know what I mean? Like read the room. Like if I was Semler, for example, I would never open any of those television. It goes out saying, right? It's nothing good waiting for you in there. It hasn't secretly turned around overnight, and they're actually like, I sort of love that Semler guy. He knows it's done. He knows that ship's sailed. Reddit's over. So that's just one thing I always get annoyed at, because they always say that line, like, guys, you don't have to put them down. It's like, that is actually sort of the point of what they're doing, though. Like, what you're sort of saying is don't make any comments in that scenario. Like, okay.
I mean, otherwise, literally every single talent member ever would just get hired, and you just have a talent list full of everyone. If you couldn't say this person should be there instead of this person, that's how it would go. I do like the barbershop analogy quickly because, like, it's almost like having LeBron go in there and listen to it is part of it. But also, I thought you were going to go with LeBron would go into the barbershop and then, like, argue for himself, like, why he's the best.
I mean, people do that as well, which is also wild, isn't it?
Sometimes they do reply. And, yeah, I've always just been of the opinion, like, it's easy to say compared to when you're actually in that moment. But it's just like, I'm looking into this thread. You do it sometimes. Why would I like take this person's opinion so seriously, right? It's like some people aren't going to like you. Like that's just how it is. Some people are going to like you. It's also dangerous, I think, to fully go into the other side where you look fully at the positive comments, because that also is going to just feed into yourself. So it's like you can't really take much of either. You should probably just try and take stuff from people you know and respect, especially because it's like it's anonymous people, right? Like, who are the people that you know in your real life that are like going into comment threads and leaving these comments? I don't think that I know anyone who really does that, right? And the people that do it are probably to an extent trying to get some sort of reaction.
Yeah. Oh, and also if they are your hate, you're never going to turn them around anyway. Like I've always thought, like I notice he doesn't do it anymore, probably because of the last couple of years, but Anders was the most famous ever for that. Even back in like 2015, Anders would go in the thread about how Anders is washed or whatever, because even back then they used to say the same shit, don't worry boys. And even back then they used to go, oh, just a shit human reaction. Oh my God, what are you doing? Or whatever, like, whatever his fucking catchphrase.
Are you kidding me?
That was the same fucking criticism like 7 years ago. Even though, by the way, he did it about equally as much as he does now, just every now and then. It's just that spoiler, you've heard him cast 1 billion games, you idiot. Guess what? You also say loads of constructive parts. You also set up your sentences where you say a placeholder and then say what you think. It's not just, I'm not a weirdo for going, here's the thing, Rich. You also have 1 million blind spots in your communication. You're just not watching yourself for 10,000 fucking hours, are you morons? Like, you're just fucking chilling in a bar going like. Like, guess what? That's annoying. The point is, 20,000 people aren't watching you. So anyway, when Anders would go in there, though, was the worst, because he would always go in and he would take like, because he could tell he was trying to be like shrewd. He would take like the most sort of like laid back Socratic method approach, where he'd just sort of be like, oh, it's interesting you say that, because what exactly is there a game that's in mind that you're thinking that I was not doing the good commentary in, because I'd really be interested to grow and learn and discuss this with you. And he's acting like that person, just some random hit, like Anders fucking silks all he says in human reactions. He's acting like that guy's actually going to go, well, actually, I'm glad you asked, Anders, because actually it was the second map of the series between Heat and, like, no one's ever going to do that ever, right? Like in that scenario, Anders, like it's a waste of time, mate. You're just spinning. And also, I'll just say this, Anders, what actually happened to Socrates? A mob killed him, you idiot. That, like, they said it didn't work out for the OG that was trying that method. They murdered him, mate. They're going to make you drink hemlock. Although, here's the thing. This is where I wish this was a different era of Mauisnake, because I could tie the edgiest joke in that right now, but whatever. We'll just leave it as it is. We'll leave it as it is.
I think I'll say this, that it can be valuable to try to judge and gauge of the general overall vibe that people are getting from your work, and if that's positive, cool. If it's negative, then I think actually giving it maybe a little bit of effort and actually trying to understand why people think you're boring or you're saying shit or like your understanding is bad. If that's kind of like what people keep saying, and a group, there's a little bit of a hive mind mentality where people will just say shit that other people say, but there's also like there's a little bit of credence to why they're saying it, and I think trying to be self-reflective enough to understand why a mob would say that you suck in some generic but specific enough way is worth analyzing your own work and trying to like better yourself, because sometimes it can be difficult in this industry to be self-reflective enough to know what you should improve on next, but you can get hints from the general public. And so like, but being able to read that and not being just getting into your own feelings, getting emotional about them just saying it is important too.
Oh, by the way, I totally agree with that point. You can also, if you're a pro, you can like interpret like the real actual criticism in what they say. As in, like, if they say like you're boring, what they really mean is like something about what you're doing doesn't capture their attention or they don't vibe you personally. Like, you can actually take like a proper, essentially you have to sort of more on it. You have to make it not stupid and make it into what like polite, because half the problem, by the way, with all these topics that we're talking about to do with feedback is just the tone and the way that the people communicate with you. They don't ever, there's no such thing as like basic common decency or politeness on the internet. That's the problem, essentially. So half the people I block, for example, that say like, you just blocked me because I disagreed with you. It's like, no, you disagreed with me like a mega obnoxious way that made me not want to communicate with you. That's it. It wasn't your opinion, by the way. Like, guess what? I'm not scared that someone has the opinion Zeru's number one. The point is, if your opinion's like, oh, you just suck Simple's dick though, don't you? Like, that's not a disagreement. You're just obnoxious, aren't you? Like,
even in good faith.
You know, just don't want that convo, do I? It's shit. And I don't know how many of these people don't get that. Like, there's so many young guys. Because here's the sad thing. There's one thing if it's a pure hater. If they're just getting a reaction or they're just trying to make you feel bad, you can see who that guy is quickly. But some of them, you actually realise, don't even know they're being obnoxious. I know. They really think, by the way, that we're just all censoring them and we're not letting them speak. So clearly they want to be part of these convos. They want to have, like, discussions and debates. They just don't... what they don't realise is the initial sort of, like, how you get someone to have that with you. And by the way, when they do that angle where they go, yeah, well, you're not like that. I don't have to be. I spent 20 years building up my rep and I create the fucking conversations. You aren't in that position. You're just a random guy messaging us. Like, you haven't... Believe it or not, that, you know, that stupid Reddit comment you see a million times, like, Thorin said this and you're all upvoted. When I said it was down. Yeah, because you're nobody. You're Joe Schmo, fucking nobody, on a random thread and you got downvoted. The reason people are upvoted is not because it's right, it's because they are interested that I said it or this player said it. Like, that carries obviously inherent interest, right? Because there's a backstory. So, yeah, I've always found that feckless as fuck, mate. It's so stupid, isn't it?
That reminds me of just reading, like, Reddit NBA comments where basically someone's like, hey, but when I said this 7 days ago, no one cared. And it's like, because no one fucking read what you wrote, dude. Like, you have
and
no
they'll be comparing it
at all.
Exactly, they'll be comparing it to like LeBron James says this guy's the next best player. Like, but when I said it though, no one cared. It's like,
I know.
The clues that you said it when you said it exactly. Yeah, the clue's that, mate. That's the clue. Right. Okay. The last one, my ugly point. It wouldn't be on brand if I didn't bring this old classic back in, but it's a real one and it deserves. Here's the key thing, Hawka. I'm always very careful about what the ugly is. Ugly shouldn't be a bad point, but it should be something where it's not totally bad. It's just like, it's just scuffed. There's something fucked about it. And this is what's ugly. The expectations around this Astralis lineup. Because here's the thing. It's over. It's over. The Astralis fanboys have been broken. All you need to know is this. Even they don't act like this team's going to win anything. Even they don't expect this team to win all the matches like against lesser teams, etc. In fact, I get the vibe now, dude, that even Astralis fans are sort of like, can't believe we got through that Heat series, fucking hell. Because if you look right now, even when Astralis wins, fucking hell, it's hard work. This team, like, I get the vibe that almost everyone, it's why I keep pointing out, and I know people think I'm going on about too much, y'all are just giving Glaive a fucking pass. He's going to get a 2-year free pass where he doesn't have to do anything, but never loses any of his status. Like, these all count, boys. This is his career right now. These are the players he's chosen to play with. He has signed a contract in good faith to get paid a lot of money. He is supposed to now be one of the best IGLs, and as a result, Astralis as a team, at least with some of the players, should be a good team. Like, this isn't like, it's not like a little cute side project or they're from some obscure country. Like, this just is Astralis. And I noticed, like, it feels like everyone's just bounced on them and all the expectations are whatever. They're just an also-ran. Like, that's ugly. That sucks, dude. Like, for me, that's the one spot I don't want to be in. I either want to, like, be so bad I have to reset the whole team, or I want to have a really good team. I don't want to be in this spot where it's like, I'm just, whatever. Like, I almost get the vibe now, dude, that we're entering the NIP era of Astralis, as in when they still had a couple of the old legends, and just you knew every year was going to be diminishing returns, and even if you got like a decent young player and it wasn't a star player, so you're never going to replace the stars, and you just gradually go downhill. Like, I get that kind of like sad vibe, because I feel like now, dude, even the players feel like they're just settled into like, this is Astralis, mate. I don't see the fire, you know what I mean? Like, remember, one thing, I used to criticise them for it, but at least when the Prime Astralis started going to shit, you would see it, dude. They would punch monitors and be hitting the desk and be doing interviews where they're getting annoyed at the analysts for not saying the number one. Like, I at least like the fire behind that. It implies you're into it. Like, now it's like the whole scene's just sort of like, whatever, we're just going to settle into this is the final Astralis phase, aren't we? Like, this is the end. What the fuck?
Yeah. There was that blast, I think it was early in the year, where like Glaive literally just had his head in his hands for like a minute afterwards, where it was almost like he looked like it just looked like he was almost defeated in that moment, which was terrifying. And then I thought you were going to bring up this interview that Blame F came out with the other day, where he said, we can be proud with what we displayed here with the new roster at the RMRs, and then said, we beat Ents, we played close versus players, close versus G2, and we beat Heat. For me personally, I thought it was a good event. Okay, you nearly lost against Heat, you nearly didn't make it, but sure, I guess that's a good event. Like, I guess you can say you made it through, and you can argue that that's the good event, but like, it just doesn't feel like the players have like any sort of ambition to be like the best anymore. It really, everything I'm seeing coming from the Astralis guys comes across that way. I think Glaive was even interviewed after they beat Heat, and I can't remember who it was. Someone was asking him something along the lines of, do you think you're going in the right direction to get back to being like the old sort of Astralis? I actually think whoever asked it had to ask in the question and realized that maybe wasn't even realistic, and kind of like backtracked it a bit and said like, in the sort of direction that the old Astralis roster were going towards. And even after he said that, he kind of answered like, we're just going to kind of, go into the major. We're working on just improving. It's like, I don't want to hear that really. Like, I want to hear you actively really trying to become the best. Just the whole vibe is just off.
What do you think, Maui?
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing with this Astralis lineup is that it just would be disingenuous to believe that they have championship aspirations with the quality that the lineup has displayed so far. Glaive is, I think he cracked the code on Ancient, which we've talked about.
Oh, he's doing a great job, yeah.
He looks like, but I don't know if the innovation is there on every other map right now, and I don't think that, like, the way I was putting it before the Farlig move was happening is that it felt like it was a more systematic sort of problem with the team for me than actually an individual one. And even though they got Farlig and are a smidgen better, I still don't think it solved nearly all of their problems, and I still think that Zipnix is just kind of collecting paychecks. I think that he's not really holding up his end of this bargain at all, and I think that's pretty. It's pretty much, it's a huge shame, but like, it's really just what it is. Like, I don't think he like his average level game to game. I can't expect him to go positive anymore. So that's just not okay.
All you need to know is there was a thread on Reddit. The title of the thread was just Zipnik's top frags on like this map, right? They don't make that thread if you're good. No. The point of that thread is like, breaking news, Zipnik's had a good game. Like, that's almost what that thread is. Because otherwise, why would it be upvoted as well? You know what I mean? Like, that shouldn't be like a big fucking deal.
No, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely at a point with Astralis right now that like they've tempered their expectations so much that it's kind of you've lost a lot of that like championship blood mentality that really I think we were used to and kind of hoping. Like, I think it still was like, if anybody really thought just like the addition of Farlig would have made them even a top 5 team, I think they were a little bit delusional in that regard too. So to be a top 10 team with this lineup for me is satisfactory, but like, that's not what I want Astralis to think about themselves. I want them to aspire to be a playoff team at this major, and if they do it, cool, good for them, but I just don't see it happening.
It's like the whole reason I said it's obvious that Device shouldn't go back to Astralis, because even Astralis fans were like, hey, if we get Device back, we could be like a top 5 team. It's like, dude, if you're adding Device, that's supposed to be the last piece that puts you in #1 in the world. Like, if adding that piece doesn't make you there, then holy fuck, we've got some pretty big problems, considering that's an enormous piece. That would be like if I was like, tell you what, give me Nico and Simple and I'll make you like the 6th best team in the world. It's like, why the fuck are they joining your team then? They should go to any other team and just be better than that. Because another thing I think's whack as fuck is, like, this exposes so many stupid narratives that fans have about how tactics work and how IGLs work in Counter-Strike. So here's a great one for you, Mauisnake. You know when fans will pick a map, it used to be the old Dust 2, maybe now it's Mirage, and they say this dreaded line that every analyst hits. They go, it's just been solved as a map. Like, all the strats have been run. There's nothing really to do anymore. If that were true, and in your brain, because I know fans believe this, you really think strats is like a binder that Glaive has. It says D_Inferno, and in it, right, he just flicks it. Right, I've got the Magus backstab, the Dupree entries. That's what they think strats is, right? Well, if that was real, then he would just get out his folders for Nuke and Inferno, the 2 best maps that he essentially was like the greatest IGL ever on, and he would go, right, look, all of these aren't going to work, boys, but we can use most of them, you know, they're real. No, because the point is, that's not how tactics work. First of all, you keep some of the same ones, they just don't work anymore. You update them constantly anyway, just so you have the element of surprise. And then secondly, there's the meta of like the incredibly tiny niche thing that all the super nerds are all fucking obsessing over for these next 2 months. Like, that is being an IGL. So if you're a fan who really thought that like Glaive solved Nuke, he hasn't. Like, all the stuff he has from Nuke, it doesn't work for him anymore. He'd actually be better off. The joke is selling that to fucking Zonic now, because at least Zonic has some of the players to do some of it with. Like, he doesn't have the players. And this is also the reason, in my opinion, by the way, why karrigan doesn't get enough credit in his career. Every team is totally different fucking players, boys. There's no overlap. There's only ROPS so far has been an overlap. Like, everyone's like a totally, here's 4 new people. Oh, they're also all from different countries. You don't have a binder that you hand out to those. You go, right, tomorrow, Monday, we start from square one. I'm going to bring in a couple of things I like, but that's it. We start from square one. Here's the personnel. We're going to build it up. I think people, essentially, who are fans, totally misunderstand what an IGL does. They really think, like, essentially, Mouse, that the IGL's like the fucking, I guess, like the offensive coordinator in the NFL, and he's just like, we've got a playbook he's reading out of, like, here's my best fucking blitzer. Like, he's like, oh, that's a defense winner. But you know what I mean? Like, they have such a weird view on what IGL is.
Yeah.
Because there's no overlap. There's no carryover from the past Astralis to this team. They're just a different team. It's a different puzzle.
Yeah, you have different personnel that just have different strengths. Like, you wouldn't really. It's really tough to find the 1-to-1 for like Dupree and Magisk when you look at this current roster. Like, they just this config is just more aggressive than anybody that he had before, and BlameF is kind of satisfying a role that almost in some ways on T side he's like more aggressive, but on certain. It's like there was role overlap between him and Zipnix on T sides before. And so they had to mix and match and find out, okay, who are we better with in this lurk position? Is it Zip or is it BlameF? And then they have to change the strat around that based off of the person's strength. So there's so much stuff that has to go into it. And it's clear that he's still finding his footing with this lineup. The thing is that I actually do think this Astralis lineup, like, has potential to improve, but I just think that it's still such a long shot for them to become like a true top 8 team at this major.
I'll also say as well, the other thing that I find a bit disconcerting is, like I say, all the games are just so messy still. They all take so much fucking effort. Like eventually, that's fine. This is another fact that gets missed. Not every team has the honeymoon period. That is, like, we see that effect with some teams. So, like FaZe, it worked like a motherfucker. Sometimes you have the teams like the Vitalities where you almost have the opposite of the honeymoon period. Actually, the first phase where you struggle the most. The problem for me is this. I know they're going to claim they've got a new lineup, Mauisnake, which is like sort of true. It's not that big a difference, like we say. Like, Farlig for Lockie isn't the end of the world. But at the same time, like, for me, you should probably already be getting good now. You know what I mean? I should be seeing some signs that it's getting good. I get the vibe personally that they're sort of stuck. I think they're just in a rot, mate. And unfortunately, because they're not FaZe Clan, they're not going to spend big. I think they're just going to be forced to play out with this lineup. That's what I think happens. I think the next few months is just the same of this.
Yeah, I don't know. I really hope after the major that they try to like think about somebody for Zip's roles. Like, even though I know he has that long contract, if you could just get one other sort of like, think of the Sanji for flip move and how that just changed what VP really looked like. If you could do something like that and give yourself a new win condition in a round as opposed to Zip almost winning a lot of clutches, which is
that's why the org angle's the killer, though, dude. Because here's the thing: this is where I notice people don't think about the wider scene. If you're a fan of Astralis, the number one question you should have isn't why are we getting lucky. It's why can't we ever get any of these heroic players? Like, why are they just off limits for us? Like, remember, until they got bought out, the org was way smaller. They were getting paid less. They would also join. I even think, by the way, now most of them would still join in the sense that, like, it would immediately get rid of all the haters. Like, they just get a chance to be on the winning team and sort of feel like, fuck, I made it. Like, I think a bunch of those players would leave like tomorrow if you asked. So the vibe becomes, why aren't they getting them? Why aren't they going out there pursuing them, trying to pay the buyouts? Because if I could say to you tomorrow, Mauisnake, tell you what, we're taking out Zipnix and Shush comes in.
Yeah.
We're fucking cooking with gas immediately, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And in the old CS scene, that move's supposed to just happen if you want it, you know?
You know, Kirby just like, I mean, I don't know where the hell Kirby is in terms of, his mental seems fantastic based off of that interview he gave, but I don't know where he is as a player right now. If he proves himself in any capacity, just, I'm willing to take that free agency gamble on him.
Sure.